Good people, you all remember the Fractal North, right? The wood elements alone stole the show, and now we have the North XL. It carries over an identical design language which so many people love, with mesh and TG panels, awesome fans included out of the box, the same wooden front facade with oak on the white and walnut on the black, but with a 36% larger frame to accommodate bigger cooling hardware and of course bigger GPUs. It took them just over 1 year to launch the XL version with better specs for hardware compatibility and etc, but I don't think they did enough. So let me explain. First, I am incredibly disappointed that they have not changed the front facade for the fan mounts because the fan bracket is non-removable. This is an issue because removing any of the stock fans from the front is a huge pain, as the screws are on the interior, and especially accessing those two bottom screws is a hassle. I mean, Fractal is known for water cooling adventures, modding support, and not being able to easily remove the stock fans out of the case and install your own is just like, come on, what's going on? Now, the included fans do move a lot of air. There's absolutely no question in that. The Aspect 14 PWM, they spin at 1700 RPM plus or minus 10%. So in my readings, I've gotten to 1800 RPM, which is insanely high for 3 front fans. So you're gonna be replacing that volume of air so quickly inside the enclosure, which is great for out-of-the-box airflow. But they introduce so much turbulence from the front panel and from the front frame onto which they are mounted, making the XL one of the loudest cases I've ever tested. I mean, take a listen for yourself. So did you notice how much quieter the case became when I removed the front panel? That is really bizarre, and also how much louder the case became when I removed the dust filter as well. So the dust filter is great because it actually contains some of that noise, but you can clearly see there's a lot of turbulence happening within that wooden facade. Even though it's beautiful, it's just not designed for acoustics. Of course, it's true that you can lower the RPM on the fans to library quiet 38 decibels when they spin at 900 RPM. They are very quiet otherwise, but like, why include 1800 RPM fans in the first place if you can't really truly utilize them in, you know, this very beautiful, smart, handsome enclosure? Now, I had this thought: what would happen if I mount the front fans on the interior of the frame, therefore giving us a little bit more space between the fans and the front panel to potentially reduce some of the turbulence? And it got worse. This is clearly caused by the fan bracket mount overlapping with the stock 140mm fans. If you had 120mm fans, it'll be less of an issue, but this clearly needs to change in the next revision. Fractal Design, please. I will say though, I love how lightweight the case is. The glass is not insanely thick or heavy. The side panel on the other side is thin and flimsy. I wish that was changed, but it makes me feel good knowing that once the system is assembled, it's not going to break my back of transferring this case from one desk to another. But at the same time, the build quality just feels really, really different versus like my $99 NV5 that feels super sturdy and really chunky, and the North XL feels a little bit like a cheap $49 case that you have to work in. Like, I do not like the thumb screws at all, and this is like, Fractal, really? This is what we get on a premium enclosure? Really? We all recall, right, how solid defined panels were with sound dampening and like really rigid side panel. Why are we going backwards? Luckily, that's kind of it on my negative list, aside from the top panel that cannot be secured to the case in any way, and on both of my samples is very loose, like a very light nudge will dislodge it from the 2 little notches that hold it in place. Not cool. But on a positive, there are plenty. First, I do love the leather notch at the top, just like on the original. The complementing silver and gold accents around the I/O and the case feet. The charcoal interior of the white model is absolutely beautiful. And now both the mesh and TG versions get a fan hub. That is relevant because the hub on the North is only available on the mesh version and not TG. But it's really cool because you can relocate this hub to any ventilation point on the enclosure. So at the back, on top of the power supply shroud, even along the top if you want, depending on how you're routing cables. So it really opens up some room for experimentation. Just make sure you have a fan plugged into the fan 1 connector, because that's the one that reads the RPM for the whole hub. We have this clever ventilation pattern at the rear for 140s and 120s, but with different mounting locations for the 120mm fan closer to the motherboard or the other way. Make sure you're reinstalling the front panel correctly with 2 tabs at the top, and it just clips in place. Now only the mesh panel comes with the optional side bracket that will support up to a 280mm radiator, which is awesome if you're going for interesting radiator placement. And because of the added width, I can still mount the side fan bracket in the top position, fully clearing my CPU cooler, which is 160mm in height. That would be just in case you want additional cooling in the motherboard area. But what's really interesting too is that it makes enough clearance for my thicker 28mm fans, that P20s from Lee. They fit no problem, and with the side panel closed, in the top position, it's fully makes it no problem, makes clearance. But because of how the side panel has additional framing cutouts at the bottom, when it's in the lower position, it does make contact with the fan frames, but not the blades themselves, which is nice. The problem with the side mesh though is that the porosity is good enough for some ventilation, but it's not good for acoustics. So definitely stick with low RPM in this area. Also, the XL now only has 2 positions for the side bracket, high and low, unlike having the 3 positions on the original North. Now, of course, the longer interior means eATX motherboards are now supported with bigger graphics and CPU cooler clearances, but the main advantage comes with larger radiator support all around, including a 420 at the front and up to a 360 at the top. If you are feeling adventurous, the XL now supports 180mm fans at the top for absolutely insane exhaust potential, and there's plenty of height in there for the thicker setups. These are 38mm thick. But man, now I think about how awesome would it be if the front was fully open with just tiny strips that allows you to install different fan thicknesses, minimizing the frame restrictions and being able to mount 180mm fans at the front like on the Torrent enclosures. Man, that would be absolutely sick, especially with this front wood. But nope, they have to protect the entire Torrent lineup first. Come on. As for the power supply shroud at the front, I am surprised they stuck around. So for 140mm hardware, you only have 30mm of clearance. So just a standard radiator there, you can now do push and pull. And for 120mm hardware, you have 60mm. So just like on the North, and even though we have so much additional length on the enclosure, I don't know why they made the power supply, especially with the way it curves, it like limits on how far you can go with the push-pull and the thickness of your ads. Storage is actually also identical to the North, a dual SSD caddy at the back and 2 hard drive cages on the floor that you can move in 5 positions depending on front radiator clearance and also your PSU length. But unfortunately, or maybe fortunately, you no longer can mount the hard drive on top of the power supply shroud to give you extra clearance. I don't mind that at all because the power supply shroud at the top looks nice and consistent. As for cooling performance on the GPU side, regardless if I use the glass side, the mesh side, I even removed the front mesh and the temperatures were all identical and matched the Fractal Design North. As for the CPU side, it's a slightly different story, so the temperatures are basically identical to the original Fractal North, no difference again between glass and mesh side panels, but as soon as I remove that front mesh, that's when things get really, really cool. And yes, that front whole design is very restrictive and also loud at the same time. Now the thing is, now that the honeymoon period is over with the wood panels, I still think it's one of the smartest looking cases around. The darker walnut is a beautiful complement for the black edition, and the lighter oak is just gorgeous with the white as well. And the only hiccup here with the entire assembly process would be that front fan bracket that is non-removable, and it's just a pain to work in if you're swapping things in and out. I was hoping for the revision 2 being the XL, being more expensive, being more feature-rich, being more future-proof, for this to actually change, but it's the same formula, and this is my hopeful reminder that I would love to see that particular thing changed in the next revision, please. As for the price, $179 for the North XL versus $139 on the original North, so a 38% expansion in size, hardware compatibility and everything else around it is better, and a 28% increase in price. I would say that's pretty decent, but the market right now is actually filled with super high quality cases that are $149 and below, and so I feel like the North could have introduced something that's easier to work in, and some additional innovative features that makes it stand out, aside from relying on this absolutely gorgeous wood panel, which turns out to be actually really loud when combined with the stock fans at full speed. So what do you guys think of the North? Let me know in the comments. I'm Dmitry. Thanks so much for watching. I'll talk to you in the next video.